In early adulthood, Kayla Mangione started to develop some physical symptoms that led her to a diagnosis of Crohn's disease. As my guest on this podcast episode, she's going to walk you through exactly what that is. She has a background in family and marriage therapy and art therapy, and is now an incredible food influencer on Instagram at the Family Food Project. But there's a story behind all the beautiful pictures of healthy food. She knows healthy eating so well because it was a huge part of her healing journey. With food and lifestyle changes, she was able to come off all medications and remains in remission from Crohn's disease. She's taken this difficult journey and turned it into something that we can all benefit from in her social media content. She's also raising her kiddos to be healthy, adventurous eaters. In this episode, Kayla shares her new take on autoimmune disease, root causes to her illness, how she got healthy, and how that's affected the way she's guiding her kids to have a healthy relationship with food. So many light bulb moments in this episode. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast, where you can learn about healthy living and be inspired to take the next step in your wellness journey. Kayla, I want to thank you for joining me on the Daily Wellness Podcast. I have been a little bit of a fangirl on your Instagram page because you share the most beautiful food pictures and wonderful recipes, and I'm a total foodie, so I'm very excited to get to chat with you today. I think that what I've gathered so far is that where you are today with all these beautiful, healthy recipes is kind of the end point or the launching of a story that has been happening for a long time in your life. And so I would love it if you would just kind of share your journey with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And you are definitely right about that. It's been a long, long journey. I would say that I started off in a family that was like really into eating. My mom was a pescatarian. We were like, I just always loved food. I was in the kitchen. I was interested in it, but I didn't really know how to have a balanced diet. And I moved out when I was 18 and kind of tried to figure things out on my own. And I think everyone can relate that around that age, you're not really focusing on what you're feeding yourself. And
I wasn't.
my story, I was okay. And then when I started living on my own and focusing on work and college and things like that, I started to get kind of sick. And I was having stomach pains and acid reflux and a few other symptoms. And I was finally diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was, I think, 21 or 22. So this is back in like 2005.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow. Can you explain what Crohn's disease is?
Crohn's disease is an inflammatory bowel disease that typically attacks your intestine, and it can be genetic. And a few people in my family were diagnosed after me. I was the first one to get diagnosed. Typical onset is late teens to early 20s, which is where I was. Sometimes it can onset around menopause as well. And it affects both men and women. And basically, it's an autoimmune disease where your body creates a lot of inflammation in your bowel, and that gives you a lot of problems.
Yeah. Was that pretty painful?
Very painful. And I did end up having an emergency surgery to remove part of my intestine very shortly after diagnosis. They think I was sick for maybe about 5 years before I got diagnosed. So by the time they figured it out, I had so much built up scar tissue in my intestine that they felt like I needed to have part of it removed, which is fairly common with that diagnosis. Of course, I was so young and I didn't know anything about it, and I was just kind of in shock and following the doctor's orders. But that was really healing from that, and having that big of a life change at that young age is really what got me interested in food and cooking and healing in a more natural way.
Yeah. What were some of those doctor's orders? Like, what were they recommending for treatment for you?
So at one point I had an IV of antibiotics, which is a life-saving treatment, but also if you're having gut issues, it can really exacerbate that. So that was a thing. And then I was on steroids for reducing the inflammation and immune suppressant drugs, because the whole idea of an autoimmune disease is that your immune system attacks itself. I kind of have an idea of what it means to have an autoimmune disease as research has kind of moved forward. I mean, this was so many years ago now. And then as I've done my own digging for myself, but yeah, they wanted me to be on a lifetime of medication. And I was so young that I just thought, I don't want to do that, because what if there's another way? And they were not happy about that. But I've been in remission ever since. And I've been off all of my medication.
Yeah. What do you mean by having a new perspective on autoimmune disease?
Well, it feels like almost everybody has an autoimmune disease at this stage, or they're on their way to one or haven't been diagnosed with one, but they're having all the symptoms, whether it be eczema through their skin or respiratory issues or other gut issues. And, we're all dealing with a combination of our genes and our environment and how that, works together to create some of the great parts about who we are and then some of the challenges about who we are. And there's no blueprint on how to take care of your body, your unique body. And so we all have to figure out how to do that. And in my journey, there was this incident that led me on a different path of how to care for my unique body and my needs. And so I don't see myself as having a disease. I don't see myself as my body attacking itself at all. I don't think that's a very healthy way to look at it, because it takes your power out of it. It makes it feel like your body is betraying you. And I don't think the body makes mistakes. I think the body communicates, and it's our job to listen.
Yeah, that's really good. I feel like I've been in that situation where you have doctor's recommendations, but then your intuition is kind of pulling you in a different direction. So can you kind of walk us through that? Because I want to give people like encouragement in that place of maybe they've been sick for a long time, or maybe it isn't new for them, but maybe what they have been trying isn't working, or they just don't want that with all the side effects of the medication, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. How would you kind of walk someone through that decision?
Well, it's a tough decision because it really depends on every person's situation and their resources and what they're willing to do, because it's a risk. And I would never advise someone to go off all of their medication and defy their doctor's orders. And I did that carefully. I stayed on the preventative medication for a while, and I just read a lot. I tried different diets. I tried eliminating certain foods. I tried supplementing. I saw other alternative healers, and I just used the amalgamation of all the information that I collected to figure out what resonated with me. And that gave me confidence to try something. And it was still a risk, but at the time I was so young that I was like, I'm going to be on medication for the rest of my life if I don't try this. And so that to me was a big motivating factor. And there are so many different kinds of doctors these days. I mean, we're talking about like almost 20 years ago. Nowadays, I feel like there's so many different kinds of doctors that you can see to help just bolster your own confidence when it comes to choosing alternative treatments.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really wise. Just gathering information. Like I always tell people, like it never hurts to learn, and get more information. And then you can process that, and you can experiment with different things and kind of take steps as you feel comfortable taking steps. But I think the education piece is huge for me in different parts of my life. That's what's given me confidence to make some changes that I needed to make.
Absolutely. I will say it is overwhelming, because the more information that you have, the more you have to use discernment and decide like what is really speaking to you. And that's difficult for people. Sometimes it's very easy to get overwhelmed. But I think, I'm constantly in a state of like tweaking my diet and my supplements and my lifestyle and my stress. And, I'm into like a little bit of biohacking, and I like to try things because I think that ultimately without our health, we don't have anything, and so it's important to see it as a journey rather than like just one destination
Right.
into health.
Yeah, agree. I think one of the characteristics of healthy living that I talk about sometimes is just having a learner mindset, like, because you're right.
Yeah.
Like you learn about one thing and kind of maybe get a grip on it a little bit, but then there's all these other things that you have to keep learning about. And I think the ability to, like, I guess the willingness to learn really, and then just applying yourself to that learning is really a key, I think, for lifelong health, because you're always going to have things that come up. And if you're a mom, then you've got to figure it out for your kids too. So I love that about you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I completely agree.
Yeah. Looking back, can you kind of process through the early days of when you had symptoms and when you first got that diagnosis? Do you think there's something that caused that in your life? Do you think there were different situations that kind of built upon each other?
Yes, I think that certainly there was a genetic predisposition. However, I think that it's Crohn's disease specifically, but probably almost all autoimmune disease is very, very reactive to stress. So in times of high stress, your body is going to shut down certain processes that, in order to save your life. It thinks it's saving your life, but then prolonged stress over time, chronic stress, can really wreak havoc on if you have a weak spot in your body. For me, that my weak spot was my gut. And so I really feel like not speaking up and literally swallowing down my feelings and my thoughts about things in order to make other people happy, I really think that was related to causing disease inside of my gut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to be a light bulb moment for a lot of people hearing this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a big part of my healing, I mean, I wish I could say it was as easy as changing my diet, but it's never that easy. It's a huge lifestyle switch. It's a constant learning curve. It's a uncovering layer after layer after layer to get down to it. And that's what healing looks like. And it's not always like, it doesn't look like an Instagram page.
Yes, that's true. So what has that looked like for you? Can you take us through some of the diet and lifestyle changes that you made?
Sure. So the first thing I did was I read a few different books and I explored with eliminating certain foods. One food that completely changed my life when I eliminated it was gluten. And back then, I mean, we're talking about, so it was probably about 16 years ago when I first eliminated gluten, and no one was talking about that and no one knew what I was talking about. And I just knew that when I didn't eat it, it was like a night and day difference for me. So that was my first introduction into, wow, the power of foods, And so I really played around a lot with like all the different kinds of inflammatory foods, what was working for me, what wasn't. And then because I did have part of my intestine removed, focusing on a nutrient-dense diet was really important to me, because where my intestine, the small intestine meets the large intestine, is where Crohn's disease likes to hang out. But unfortunately, that's a really absorptive part of your digestive tract. So for me, not having that, it was really important for me to get the maximum amount of nutrients from the foods that I was eating. And so that was its own kind of journey. As far as lifestyle, like I was in my early 20s. So I was, drinking and kind of staying out late and not sleeping that much and working really hard and stressing out and taking flights here and there. And so I had to really address like how I was living my life and slow it down a bit. I was very lucky at that time. About 6 months before I was diagnosed, I met my partner, who is now my husband. And so I was really lucky because I was able to kind of slow down and then have a different kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I think that hearing your examples, I feel like gives people some ideas of where to start, because sometimes you're just like, there's so many things I could do. Like,
Yes.
where do I start? So thank you for sharing that. You've kind of taken this journey and turned it into something that really helps other people. And I kind of want you to share about that. Can you kind of share about what you're doing now, or even maybe tell us about your family and how you guys have been changed by all of this?
So there was one extra important piece of the puzzle, which was that I went to school to become a marriage and family therapist. And so I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and art therapist. And by using those tools, I really was able to dig deeper inside of myself, deal with any past traumas. And that's really informed my approach. And that also informed my approach about how I was going to raise my children. Of course, the feeding of children is such an exciting time. And for me, I saw it like they were blank slates, like I had the opportunity to lay this foundation for nutritious, balanced eating. And I was so excited about it that I just thought like, I can't wait to do this. And I just really dove in head first because the way I saw food had forever been changed because of my own eating. And I really wanted to make sure that my kids were just loved food and could cook for their families if they wanted to and knew how to take care of themselves through food. And so I really focused on that. And in doing so, I thought like, I don't know, maybe I'm putting so much time and effort. Maybe I could put this on Instagram. I didn't even have an Instagram page, even a personal one at the time. And I thought like, maybe I'll just share meal ideas and like that could help other people because so many people were confused. People were coming up to me at the park like, what are you feeding your daughter? Like, why is she eating that? Like all the toddlers were eating the same kind of thing. And then my kid was over there like eating peas, And so I started sharing on Instagram. I had no idea what. I thought I like invented it. I didn't even know anyone was sharing meals there. I had no idea. And then I found this amazing community and I've just kept sharing because as we all know, I called myself the Family Food Project because it's an ongoing project from the time they have one bite of food or even from breastfeeding in the beginning to now my oldest daughter's 9 and sometimes I wake up and she's made a breakfast for our whole family. So it's been really cool to see. And I'm happy to share it with others.
Amazing. Yeah, I think you're doing terrific. Like, can you tell me, like, what do you think like a healthy relationship with food looks like as you've kind of healed your body and learned how to eat in a way that is good for you? Like, and now you're teaching your kids about that. Like, how does that mindset play out in your family?
Well, I want to be sensitive about how I answer this question because I think a lot of people have some disordered thoughts about food, and I don't blame them because it's so many things, especially from a woman's perspective. I mean, from the time we start puberty to the time we end menopause, like our bodies are changing a lot, and I don't think people think about that very much. I mean, I think that a lot of times or traditionally nutrition and body image and everything was from the male perspective, and from a female perspective, it's completely different. Our cycles are completely different. Our bodies fluctuate so much. If we get pregnant and then postpartum and then, all of that, we're just in a constant state of change. So the amount of fuel that we need, the kind of fuel that we need is always going to be changing too. And so that can lead to a lot of struggles for people. And also food is celebratory and it's cultural and is comforting, and it can be so much about pleasure, which I think is important, but it is also fuel. So finding the balance there is really tough. So I would say for my family, I've just made sure that they know how to properly fuel themselves, but we also leave a lot of room for food for pleasure. And I think I do prioritize cultural foods because I think that's an important part of, having a healthy relationship with food and food sharing, right? Eating with others. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that community aspect is really important, and that creates amazing memories for kids as well.
Yes, I love all those things about food. I
Yeah,
agree.
me too.
Can you give us some tips for getting our kids in the kitchen with us?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that parents forget is that kids want to be involved. And sure, it takes longer and is messier, but I think when you get kids to buy into their meal long before it hits their plate, I think you're going to just have a better chance of them being open-minded. So by that, I mean, take your kids grocery shopping or to the farmer's market, or if you're able to start a little garden with them so they can see where food comes from. By the time they grow their radish, they're going to be so excited about it that they're going to want to try it. And if they're in the kitchen washing things with you and chopping things up, I mean, from the time my kids were little, I had kid-safe knives and they were up there chopping things up, snapping asparagus and sorting through beans and things. And like, they love being involved in that. And by the time it came to eating, they had already built a relationship with those foods. So it was less intimidating. So there's a lot of different ways to get your kids to eat. And I share a lot on my Instagram page, and I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out and has like a challenge that they want some more advice with. But I say the buy-in before they eat is really important.
Yeah, I think that involvement does create buy-in. You're more curious, you're more invested in the outcome. And, I think that's brilliant. I have loved having my kids in the kitchen most of the time. Sometimes it's hard and stressful. Most of the time I love it. When mine were little, I just think that it was so easy to find little things for them to do in the kitchen, like all the peeling eggs and chopping little veggies and, stirring different mixtures. There's all kinds of creative ways to let your kids participate. As mine have gotten older, I am the one that does most of the cooking in the house. It's kind of like my chore, Everybody has chores that they do. And I realized that my teenagers weren't just asking to be in the kitchen with me as much as they were when they were little. So now, every Thursday night in our home, like one of the kids is responsible for the whole meal. So every Thursday night, like one of the kids is assigned dinner. And since I have 4, that means like once a month I get a night off, or once a week I get a night off. And once a month they get a chance to create something, for the family. And it just depends on, the day and the week and whatever as to how challenging that is for them. Because sometimes it's something new that they've never made before, and sometimes it's something they're familiar with. But I also think that's really important for them to have that confidence, like going into adulthood. Yeah, of like, I can do this. Like it's normal. It's a normal thing to be in the kitchen and to prepare your own food and to eat healthy. Like that's a normal thing that I can do.
I always tell my kids, when you move out and all your friends want to come over and you can make them a meal, you're going to be so popular. Everyone's going to be like, I want to come to their house. They make the good food. Because that's like, I think a key ingredient in a fabulous party is to have good food. So I think it gives kids so much confidence. And I think that's wonderful that you're doing that.
Yeah, that's kind of plays into what you said about just enjoying food too. Like when you know how to create good food, like it doesn't just bring you pleasure to eat it, it brings you pleasure to share it, and invite other people into to that joy and just having a good time together and eating great food. Like I think that's pretty rewarding.
It's very rewarding, and it's extremely important for sensory purposes for children. If you think about cooking, you're like using touch and taste and smell, and you're using all of the things. So that's really good for their brain development. And of course, I always tell parents, like, if you are at the end of your rope and you don't feel like you can be patient in the kitchen, don't do it that day. Like, it's okay to skip days. Like, you don't have to have your kids in the kitchen for every meal. I certainly don't. And there's times where they want to be in the kitchen and I'm like, sorry, can't do it today, because it's not worth, losing my temper or getting, frustrated with. Sometimes you just got to get in and get it done quickly. But if you can make time for that, I think it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's good advice. Just give yourself some grace.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you feel like your kids have become pretty adventurous eaters?
Oh yeah, I'm so proud of them. I think, I did get lucky because of course, selective eating can have a genetic factor to it. There are kids that are considered super tasters, or there are kids that do have sensory or texture issues. And I was lucky enough to not have any of those hurdles necessarily. I mean, there were times, and there are times, where children become more selective because suddenly they get more autonomy and they want some independence, or they want some control, or maybe something else is feeling out of control in their life. So they use food to be the thing that they can control. So they can always say, no, I'm not going to eat that. And then, of course, if you've spent your time making a meal and buying the food and everything, they're going to get a reaction from you. And so it's not that they want to make you upset. It's just that they're flexing their power in a different way. So that always tends to happen. And that was true with my kids as well. But they love food and they love to cook and try new things. And we've made it a fun thing. And I've always shown them that I enjoy food so much and my husband enjoys food so much. And we eat together, and if we see something we've never tried before at the farmer's market or the grocery store, I'm always open to getting it and trying it with them. So it's become like a fun thing that we can do together.
Yeah, we don't eat out a ton as a family because we do cook at home a lot. But one thing we do when we go out to a restaurant, if there's something new on the menu that they're not familiar with, or we're in a new part of the country, and there's like a regional dish that they've never had, we always try to get something like that everyone can try, something that we wouldn't normally cook at home. And that's a fun way to like introduce new foods, because you're like, oh, you're at a restaurant, it's so pretty, and it looks exciting. And so that can be an easy way. Like, you don't feel like you invested a ton of time into making it. You paid for it, but you know what I mean? You didn't have to go through the process of making it, and everybody can just try a little bit.
I love that. And I think food sharing is so important for so many reasons. But one of the things that I often recommend to parents who are struggling with their children not eating is to share off of one plate with them, because sometimes it's overwhelming to have a portion for a child. And if they can just taste a bite, or they know that everyone's trying off the same thing, I think it's less intimidating. And I think that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty good at countercultural, though, because us Americans like to have our own food.
But yes, and there are some good reasons to have your own food. But I think for kids that are struggling, it's really important to teach them. When my kids are not getting along, one thing that I do on purpose is I will serve them lunch on like their one platter together. I'll call it like a snack board, put it on one platter, and then they have to communicate and share. And it's been wonderful for us. Like, they have to say like, oh, well, how many did you have? Oh, I wanted this many, or like, and most of the time they're able to work out these little squabbles that they have.
Very creative. I love that. Would you be open for a few questions before we end?
Sure.
Okay. So what is one healthy living resource that you would recommend to people, maybe that want to start eating healthier or learn about autoimmune disease or whatever comes to mind?
Ooh, this is a kind of a tricky question, because it really depends where everyone is in their journey. And like I said before, it can be so overwhelming when you want to make a change to know where to start and to know what to do and who to trust, because internet makes everything seem so like every piece of information is conflicting. But I think challenging your own belief system is really important, not just in healthier living, but in all of life. So I recommend reading or listening to ideas from people whose view might differ from yours. And I couldn't say exactly what, because we all tend to listen to things that kind of resonate with who we are, and that's great. But I challenge myself to follow people on social media or listen to podcasts, audiobooks, read books, read blogs that have a differing viewpoint to mine, that have had a lived experience that's different than mine. So I think that's a really good way to start opening your mind to some possibilities of where you could make change, challenge your own ingrained belief system, because a lot of the beliefs that we have are rooted in protecting us as children, and maybe we don't need those quite so much anymore as we become adults.
Yeah, and that would be an easy one to do as well. There's so many like free podcasts out there, so many audiobooks that you can get, for free. So that's a great idea, an easy one and a free one.
Yeah.
And I get to ask the family food project girl, what is your favorite healthy snack?
Oh my gosh, how can I ever pick one snack? We love a snack around here. I will say one of the best things I did for my kids starting last year was I created a chart with different categories of protein, fat, and carbs, because I really wanted my kids to learn how to make a balanced snack. Because I don't know about you, but probably a lot of parents have seen what it's like to give their kids just like some fruit or some crackers, and then they're starving an hour later. And that to me it's a challenge. So I created this chart so my kids can make their own snacks with a fat, a protein, and a carb, and they can choose however many they want from each category, but it has to have one of each so that they can make balanced snacks. And that to me is the best snack. But personally, I love a fancy drink. So not like an alcoholic drink like that. I love making like a matcha latte, and sometimes I'll make one like an iced matcha latte with muddled strawberries and like rose. And I just love I'm such a like cozy, warm beverage kind of girl. I just love having something like that.
I wish I was at your house right now and could have one of yours. That would be wonderful. And my last question is, who would you like to see as a guest on the Daily Wellness Podcast?
Wow. Well, so I know you already had my friend Shauna Holman on, and I just love her so much. And
That's how I found you.
I'm so grateful to her for that. And I love her book as well, A Healthier Home. It's such a great resource. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Kanchan Koya of Chief Spice Mama. She's a dear friend as well. She has amazing ways of incorporating spices into your recipes. Dr. Vivian Chan of Plateful Health, she is just a wealth of information, an MD, and created the Limb Box, which is a red light therapy device that I just love. Gosh, there's so many wonderful people online, but those are a couple that I would love to see here.
Yeah, that's perfect. Any parting words of advice that you would love for everyone to know before we go?
Oh, I just thought of one more. My friend, Dr. Natasha Beck of Dr. Organic Mommy. She's wonderful. She's got great advice for healthier living and also how to raise children.
Okay, great. I'll definitely check those out.
Sorry, parting advice?
Yeah, anything we haven't chatted about that you would love for everyone to know?
Well, I think go easy on yourself. If you're starting in on the wellness path and you're not feeling great and you want to feel better, just go easy on yourself, because putting too much pressure on yourself is not going to help. There's so many resources out there. Like I said, use discernment, use your intuition. I think people forget how strong their intuition is and how powerful it is. And then, never stop learning. Just be open-minded, because your thoughts about things might change, and that's a good thing.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.